have a model of the small intestine, and before we start looking at the tissue types represented here, let's orient ourselves regarding this model. So up here, if you can see this, these are villi right up here. These are not microvilli. Villi in general are much larger than microvilli. So these structures that I'm pointing to would be towards what we'd call maybe the apical side. And up here, it's kind of cut off by this recording, but up here where you see me pointing, this would be the lumen of the small intestine. And a lumen is just a space. So if you think of the small intestine as a long tube, the lumen would be the empty space inside of that tube. Down here, we have the outer wall of the small intestine, and this is where we would find certain types of muscle tissue. All right, so now that we're oriented, let's look at the two tissue types represented here in particular. So first, we're going to look at simple columnar epithelial tissue. So like I said before, these structures are villi, and on these villi, you would find this simple columnar ET. You'll see right here these pinky, peach-colored cells that I'm pointing to. Those are absorptive cells. Absorptive cells are just the regular columnar cells of this tissue. Now I'm going to point to these almost U-shaped blue structures, and these are the goblet cells that you find interspersed in this tissue type. These goblet cells are going to be secreting mucus into the lumen of the small intestine, and they're going to be found more to the apical side of that tissue type. I do want to point out that this tissue in here that I'm pointing to, the simple columnar epithelial, is not ciliated, so there's no brush border of cilia on this. We do see a ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue, but that's in the trachea, and unfortunately I don't have a good model of that one for you. So just remember that on this model, which is of the small intestine, it's not ciliated. All right, so up here we have our simple columnar epithelial tissue, and down here in these bottom regions we have smooth muscle tissue. Now in the small intestine we have two layers of smooth tissue. First up here we have the circular layer of smooth tissue, and down here we have the longitudinal layer. So the circular layer is almost cut, or it is cut in a way where you see a cross-section of all of these muscle fibers. So it looks really small and you're not really sure what you're looking at necessarily. But down here, this is where, in this longitudinal layer, where you could see the long fusiform or spindle shape of these smooth muscle fibers. You'll notice that there's no striation on these muscles. That's what tells us, well, that's one of the features that tells us that it's smooth muscle. But when you're looking at your slides for histology, a dead giveaway to tell us that we're in the small intestine is looking at a slide. You'll see muscle fibers oriented in this longitudinal direction, and then immediately either below or above, depending on how you're oriented on the slide, you'll see like cross sections of these muscle fibers. So that's a dead giveaway that you're looking at small intestine, or the wall of the small intestine, and you're looking at smooth muscle which is present there.